Today, we're making candles. We're gonna make the rich person's version and the poor pioneer person's version. The rich person, pure beeswax. But the second kind is gonna be the rough and ready pioneer candle. The candle that odds are most people out here on the frontier had access to and could make themselves. And that is the tallow candle. We gotta start all the way from the beginning on that with a cow that lived its whole life on this ranch. We're gonna take all the extra fat that might be considered waste today, but it wasn't waste to a pioneer. That was liquid gold. We're gonna put it into our big black kettle and we're gonna render it down over the course of an entire day. And we're gonna take that to make a pure white version of these. Hey. So although there's snow on the ground, it's actually shaping up to be a really nice day out here. I bet it's gone from below freezing to mid-40s already this morning. I'm gonna get this campfire roaring, and then I have a box that my mother-in-law got from the butcher. Talk about something people used to all do that just about nobody does anymore. I know some hunters and some ranchers who do it. They render their own lard, and man, it is a dying thing to do. Pretty old school. We're gonna put a big cast iron pot over the coals, and we are gonna render down that fat until we get pure tallow, which could take anywhere from a few hours to all day. Hopefully the wind stays down for us and we get a nice day to do this, but it's something I've been looking forward to. Candle making is one of those skills history has forgotten. When a pioneer came west and homesteaded this land and built this house, lighting was either by candle or by oil lantern. Both would certainly have been used. Oil you have to buy, but candles you can make from your own animals. All right, so those coals are starting to burn down. We are surrounded by the cows. They're very curious about what we're doing today, but shh, don't tell them. So we've got a big bucket of the cut off bits of beef fat from processing one of the steers. I can hear it really bubbling away in the pot. Okay, so I've been fiddling in here getting this wood stove cleaned and prepped for cooking later in the day, but we need to go out and check on our tallow because we're hoping that that fat is starting to turn to a liquid and render out, but I piled a bunch of coals on top of the Dutch oven as well just to jumpstart this initial cooking. As it goes on longer, we need to make sure we don't let anything burn because that can kind of ruin the whole mixture. So we just need sort of a low, even heat, which on a campfire is so hard to achieve. Burning pine with a gentle breeze on a cold day, there's just so many factors. So let's go peek in at it, see if the fat is melting, hopefully not burning, but let's go check on it. I had a big roaring fire going and I'm kind of gonna let that go out. We've been at this for many, many hours today. So I banked up the coals and I'm gonna give it one last really good hour of melting down, and then we are going to sift out all the pieces that are left. I mean, back in the day, they could have let this go all night long, or at least, for a full day, start to finish, dawn till dusk, because they wanted to get every last bit of goodness that they could out of it. But I'm gonna be really satisfied with any bit that I get. This is the really good stuff. This is a braided candle wick. This was invented, I think sometime around the mid-1800s. Before that, it truly was just string. But this stuff is the good stuff, and it helps the candle burn really evenly. So we've got that. We've got a melting pitcher for melting down the wax. While everything is melting down, I'm going to braid the wicks through the tin molds. And this sounds like, yeah, just braid the wicks. What could be that hard about it? It's tricky. It's tricky. It's taken a bunch of trial and error over the years to figure out that you need little bits of wire to center the wick, because if that wick gets too far to one side or the other, the whole candle valleys and fails. So you really have to keep the wick perfectly straight, and you need a long, tough wire that's very skinny in order to push that wicking through, and you almost have to weave it through the mold in order to be able to get all those wicks to stay taut and centered. One of those things, again, if you grew up doing it, it'd be easy, but if you've never done it, it's tricky. It's tricky. I have no idea if pewter can handle this kind of heat or not. I'm not sure I'd want to eat out of it, but I don't intend to use this tallow for frying. I thought about it, but I think lard is a much better frying fat. But this is going to be excellent stuff for making candles. So that's what we're going to do with it as soon as it's cooled.
Look.
All right, that tallow is cooling really nicely. It's taking on that pale, creamy white color. I coated all the cast iron and the extra liquid tallow that we had, and then I'm heating that back up over the fire. And that's gonna help season it a little bit more. You can see it turns into a creamy white. That's exactly what it should look like. This metal is gonna help that heat dissipate and help this cool a lot faster, especially out here on a cold Montana evening. So we're gonna give it a little more time, and then we should be able to pop these blocks right out. These bars of tallow have turned out beautifully. They have a silky finish. There's a little bit of sediment in the bottom, but nothing too bad. This will be excellent for candles. The day's getting pretty late, but the next stage is to take that tallow, melt it back down, pour it into tin candle molds. Now that in itself is a whole process and art form. That is a forgotten bit of knowledge. So through a lot of trial and error, I think I've perfected how to do it. I think we'll probably make 3 types of candles. First, we're gonna make pure beeswax, which is beautiful. It's a dark golden orange color. It's kind of the Rolls Royce of candle making. But then I think we're also gonna make a pure tallow, which should be bone white, and then a 50-50 mix. And I'll tell you the reason I think the 50-50 is gonna be the best one of all. So although a lot of people might say, well, beeswax is the best, obviously. It's the most expensive, it's the most refined, it has a beautiful smell of honey when you burn it. It's clearly the winner. Not necessarily with taper candles. Taper candles are really long and skinny, and you put them up in a chandelier where they kind of need to handle themselves. And I found over the years that pure beeswax, because it has such a high melting point, and it's really kind of like a super hard wax, not only is it hard to get in and out of the molds when you make it with tin molds, but when you burn it in a chandelier, sometimes that wax is so hot that when it starts to create valleys, the whole candle can drip. And man, if you get beeswax dripping onto a tablecloth or anything like that, it's a nightmare. It is not fun to try to clean up. So beeswax has some pretty big downsides when it comes to taper candles. Pure tallow has some huge downsides too. They definitely have a lower melting point than beeswax. So, I mean, they're kind of greasy to the touch, and they smell a little bit beefy. Nothing too offensive, but there's a reason most people today don't use tallow for candles. It just has a little bit more earthy smell. But in the interests of history, we're gonna make it exactly the way a pioneer would have made it. So let's make some pure tallow candles. So this process is one of those things that most of the knowledge has been lost. So I'll just throw out a few tips that I've picked up along the way in case you guys ever want to try this. After they try to get all the good meat off, you're left with the fat. Now the best fat is kidney fat. I've done this enough times to know muscle fat and kidney fat are not the same thing. But it's really hard these days if you go to your butcher and you say, well, I want kidney fat. Most of the time they're not gonna do it for you. They're just gonna give you a bucket of everything. We're lucky to get any of this, but back in the day when you did your own, you could have really isolated the best bits of fat. So if you get it off of a steer or a cow, that when you render it down can become tallow or suet. From a pig, if you render down the kidney fat, that's lard. And lard really is like the cream of the crop, the best you can get. It tends to be really white, really mild in flavor. Basically, good lard has no discernible flavor at all. So you can do anything in it. You can fry food, you can use it in baking pie crust. It really is the best of the best. But tallow, rendered from a cow, which a lot of people would have had, you could use it to make candles, you could use it to cook food. If we can render this down properly and not burn it, we're gonna get a pretty neat product at the end. Nobody does this. It's a smelly job, it's a dirty job, it's an outdoor job. And the way we process beef in our modern world, we don't even see the cow, let alone these extra bits of the cow. But this was a part of everyday life back in history. And there's a lot of useful things that can come out of an animal if you know how to process it right. Slowly but surely, all those chunks of fat are turning down into a liquid. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. It's just hour after hour, slowly going through this until we get a result that will actually be shelf stable as long as you keep any animals away from it. I know that when I would make tallow candles, I had a Scottish Terrier and he would try to sneak in and grab the candles and he would gobble them up, swallow them whole. So they are a dog treat as well as a candle.
Here before.
Let me see that.
Come on, look. You can see that this rock sample is very not that yellow.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Let's look at this.
Look.
I think it's gold.
Yeah, I think it's gold too.
And I just keep rotating this. It actually smells really good. I don't know how to describe it. It's a very specific smell. The rendering of fats. It's a nice smell. It's a comforting smell. So you can see the really white fat has rendered completely out. In our situation, our lives don't depend on this fat to get us through winter. We've got a melting pitcher for melting down the wax, and into that I'm gonna throw a couple of blocks of this tallow. Alright, that should not take too long to melt down. Like I said, tallow has a really low melting point. Doesn't take a whole lot to turn it into a liquid once it's been rendered like this. So, well, I'm not so sure that was good for the plastic handle, but... So we've got pure liquid tallow again. And there's all sorts of pioneer stories about people getting desperate enough to eat their candles. So it is a form of food, and that comes with all the problems that storing food and food going bad has, right? Okay, I've poured the pure tallow. We're gonna let that cool while I heat up the 50-50 mixture of tallow and beeswax. So our neighbor Tom keeps bees. He keeps me in great supply of beeswax, but it's in this giant heavy block. So we gotta go get the axe and make this smaller. There we go. So beeswax has downsides, tallow has downsides. I've combined them together. I heat up both and I mix those waxes together. And I actually really like the candle that I get as a result. So a 50-50 mix, when you pour it into the tin mold, it slides back out really nicely. It comes out kind of a golden cream color. It still has the smell of beeswax, but it has a little bit lower melting point. It just seems to burn super nicely when you put it up in a chandelier. Heat up a pot of boiling water or near boiling, and then I pour that over the mold after the candles have cooled as much as possible. If you do it too fast, they can crack. So it's a process you gotta be careful with. But on a day like today where it's just moderately cold, we'll heat up a kettle full of water and we'll just gently drizzle that over the mold, and that should get the candles to just gently release. The beeswax is gonna smell amazing. The tallow is as true to history as you can get, and the mixture of both should give us a perfect burning candle for long nights in the winter in this homestead house. It's a bit greasy in my hands as I touch it, but this is very, very authentic. This is the type of candle that a pioneer would have made, just a pure tallow. Then you've got your pure beeswax. And these, again, you can polish them until they just glow orange. But these are the most stunning, and oh, they smell amazing. And then we've got the 50-50. And you can tell it's a little bit more orange than the white was. And of course, the more beeswax you add, the more orange it'll get. Sometimes like a 70-30 mix, beeswax to tallow, is really the perfect combo. But we did half and half, and I think these will burn beautifully. If you guys want to see the journey we took rebuilding this 1889 homestead house, click into the playlist on screen for that year-long series. And we hope you'll stick around this winter, because we're going to be in here every week cooking, making candles, hand sewing, doing all those sorts of pioneer skills that history has forgotten. So we hope you'll stick with us, and we'll see you in the next one.